So this morning I'm going to install these Bilstein 5100 series struts on the front of my vehicle. These are the struts that, if you're not familiar with them, have adjustable ride height. So when they come right out of the box, the circlip is on the very bottom groove, which is your factory ride height. If you install these as they are, it's not going to affect your ride height. If you want a little bit more front end lift, you can take these off, move them to the different grooves, and let's see here. What it gives you is, so you got your stock ride height in the first groove. The second groove gives you 3/4 of an inch higher front end. The next groove, the third from the bottom, gives you right at 1 1/4 inch front end lift, and then the very top one is going to give you 1.85 inches, so almost 2 inches of lift if you go to this very top one. Now keep in mind, when you do that, the spring is going to be compressed more, which is what's going to cause the front end to be lifted slightly, and it's probably going to be a little bit rougher of a ride. So I'm going to keep mine right here. I've already got a 2-inch spacer in the bottom on this truck, and we're going to keep that spacer in there. And of course it does come with a new bag of hardware, and whenever we get to the assembly of this strut, I'll show you how all this goes together. Of course, in the box you do get a Bilstein sticker if you like sticking stickers all over your stuff. So let me get the front end all jacked up, and we'll get started on this. Okay, so here we are. We're getting ready to get started. Now, the first thing I want to note is I've got a 2-inch spacer on the bottom of my strut. So I'm going to have to go through an extra step that you should not have to go through. If you have the factory setup with no strut spacer on the bottom, you are not going to have to bust your top ball joint loose. I'm going to have to, because I've got to pivot this out of the way. You can see how the bolt here is captured. I would not be able to pull that bolt up out of there. Your bolts are going to come out of the bottom as long as you don't have a spacer in the bottom. That's a spacer that gives a 2-inch. That's a leveling kit, a 2-inch leveling kit. I've got a video on how to get those, how to put those in there if you're interested. But as long as you have the factory setup, you are not going to have to bust your upper ball joint loose right here. So I'm going to have to do that so that I can pivot this and move that half shaft back enough to where I can get the bolt up and out of there. So basically all you're going to have to do is pull your 2 bolts out. Yours will come out the bottom, and then 3 nuts up top here, which is easy, and the strut will come right out and come right up out of the top, and I'll show all that. But first thing I want to do, there's a brake line right here. Since I'm going to bust my upper ball joint loose, the knuckle is going to want to pivot aft, and I just want to make sure that it's not going to stretch this brake line. Now this ABS sensor line just pop out of its little holder there, and that should be good for that, but the brake line might be kind of tight. So 10mm for the brake line. I'm going to have it out of there, and then we're going to get the ball joint busted loose, pivot that knuckle out of the way, and we'll be good. And if you do put a leveling kit in, you might want to watch the video, because most of them say that you got to bust your tie rod loose. You don't have to do that, as long as you leave your key in the unlocked position to where you can turn your wheels. If you turn your wheel all the way this way, it gives you plenty of room to move your knuckle back and forth. So you might keep that in mind. But anyway, with that said, let me I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Let me go ahead and get the brake line busted loose, and then we're going to go from there. Okay, I think the first thing I'm going to do, I've already got the brake line disconnect. I'm going to I'm going to loosen the stabilizer link, because that will help the control arm come on down. I'm not going to take the nut all the way off, that way it'll just be easier to get back together. And since I'm going to have to bust the ball joint loose, I guess I may as well do that. And that is a 18 millimeter. Since it's right above the CV joint, I can't get on it with any kind of air tool, which sucks. Would be a good idea if you've got any kind of buildup on your threads anywhere, take a little wire brush and clean them up. Now remember, if you don't have the leveling kit in the bottom, one of these, you're not going to have to worry about busting your ball joint loose. So it'll be a lot easier for you to get these struts installed. I'm going to leave the nut on just a little bit. And that's as far as I'm going to go for now. I'll take the nut off whenever I'm actually ready to pivot it back. Right now I'm going to go after these here, which I think these are 11/16 on the bottom. Okay, we will go ahead when you do set that over to the side, just be easy with it to make sure that none of your lines are being tensioned the wrong way. And like I say, your bolts are going to come out the bottom, so all this that I've already done, you are not going to have to do unless you've got a leveling kit. And on the top, there's a couple little retainers for the wires. They just pop right off. So, kind of set the camera kind of where you see what I'm doing. I'm just going to use a pry bar. See if I can get in there and pop these things up. Okay, that one's up. And that one's up. And the fender skirt is real flexible, so you can work around it. Now you can get those from the top. I'm going to see about doing them from the bottom with an air ratchet. By the way, they're 18 millimeter. Now to get the strut out, you're just going to drop it down a little bit and pull it up out of the top. Just like that. Now here comes the part that scares everybody. And that's taking the spring off. I'm going to wait for that compressor to stop, then we'll start again. Alright. Always nice to have something to kneel on. These are not expensive spring compressors, so I'm a little leery of them, but that's all I've got. I don't do this a whole lot, so I've never invested in a really good pair. The important thing is to grab as much spring as possible. And what I mean by that is get on the very top spring and the very bottom spring as much as you can. And then go 180 out. Do the same thing. And I don't really like running them down with an impact, but I am a lot lazier than what I used to be. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Now remember, as long as this nut is on, even if these broke, the spring's only going to go right here. So you're not really in much danger until you take this nut off. So keep that in mind too. Always good to lube these threads up. And what I like to do, just to be on the extra safe side, is have that aimed away from you. Get an extension. Little at a time on both sides. See, these bolts are starting to bow, so that's the scary part. Just make sure that it's aimed away from you. Now you've still got about an inch of spring right here that you don't have to have this completely off the seat. And I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to start pulling this nut off. Most attention the spring compressor is holding right now. always a good idea to look to see what the orientation is. Remember, we want to keep it to where if it did let loose, you're safe. Now, on these Bilstein struts, take your bag of hardware, and the only thing we're actually going to need out of here, I believe, is this ring. And if you look, you've got a groove in one side of this ring, the other side you don't. Well, that groove is what this circlip fits in. So make sure that when that's on, that's what captures that, and there's no way for it to now spread apart. Now, we got to reuse this. So I've got to pop this off, which is nothing more than a couple taps with a hammer. And if you look, if you compare this one to the one Bilstein sends, this one's a heck of a lot more heavy duty. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse the factory one. But at this point, we need this piece. Again, an easy way to do it is to stand the strut up like that. And you're just going to tap on it a little bit. I'm going to go clean this up a little bit, and then I'll be right back. And what I would do if I was you before you started this job is order some new, I don't know if these are Teflon or nylon or what, but order some new ones. See how that's cracked? That way, if yours are cracked, you won't have to reuse cracked ones. I'm not going to wait around and try to figure out where to get these. I'm fine with them. So you're going to slide that down. Okay, once you get it in there, there's little recesses in here for these to sit in. So make sure you find those. Alright, my battery went dead, so I had to go get another one. So whenever you're going back together with this, I've got the strut all pushed up in there. This plate's ready to go back on. And the only thing you really need to remember about this plate is you've got a notch right here. That goes opposite from where the spring end is right here. So I'm going to turn this around. You've got some indentions in here for these to fit in. So make sure you hit that. Remember, there's the spring end right there. I'm going to put this in the back. Which will put it just like that. This goes on next. Then your nut. And as long as you have the spring compressed enough, you should be able to get that nut on there. I'm going to rotate the strut just a little bit so that these are angled properly and it's in line with the where the spring ends right here, the end of the spring. So that, I think, is about where I want it to go forward. The impact. Get off there. All right. Reverse. I'm going to lube my thread. You can see how bowed these are, I think. Just go to show you how much tension they're under. How scary this can actually be. Alright, one strut put together. Make sure that the strut is angled right. Meaning the end of the strut's forward. Take a nut. Once you get the strut up there, just put a nut on the top and you can let go of it. I'm going to go ahead and start all the top nuts. We'll see about getting this spacer in there. Well, it's all loose. Guess I can go ahead and tighten up. I'm going to go ahead and tighten, actually I'm going to go ahead and tighten the top up. And then I might put my other jack underneath the control arm and see about lifting it up just a little bit. I'm going to get my other tools over here. Alright, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten up the bottom. Doesn't really matter, I don't think. Get that sway bar link. Now remember, you are not going to have to bust your ball joint loose like I did. So now, here's where the fun begins. Okay, I'm gonna have to get my jack. Over here. Let me put this over here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get this tightened up. I ain't gonna make you watch it because. Okay, got the upper ball joint tightened up. Let's see, I guess the next thing. Alright, so here's the bolt for this bracket. Now the nice thing about this Nano is you got power settings. You got 3 different power settings. So I'm going to turn it on the lowest one because this is just a little 10mm bolt. Shove this piece back in there. Now all I've got to do is tighten the top 3 bolts up, or nuts. And that shall complete this little job. Forgot what size they were. How did I get that on there the first time? what is that, 18. Okay, so I just grabbed a ratchet wrench. I don't like the fact that I scuffed up my fender skirt. So those are hooked up. Now the only thing that's left is you have these little wire keepers. Make sure you get them on. Another one back here in the back. I know it's probably dark, but hopefully you can see that. Keeps your harnesses from falling on the exhaust and everything else. And good idea just to make sure that everything's tight the way it should be and out of the way. I'm going to lower this jack under the control arm. Alright, so this job's done. Got my new Bilstein 5100 struts. I don't think I mentioned it in this video. I did whenever I put the rear Bilsteins on. But this truck rode very bad. There was actually dips coming home from work that if I hit the dip on I-35, which is a major highway here in Texas, if I hit it at 65 or 70, it literally feels like I get air and I come up out of the seat a couple inches. My son's Tacoma, which I believe still has the factory shocks and struts on it, it glides right over it like it's a desert runner style truck. So I'm hoping that these are going to make a big difference. The back ones, I could definitely tell a difference whenever I'd hit a bump. Whenever I'd hit a bump in the front, and then right whenever it hit it in the rear, you could easily tell a difference that the rear was a smoother, you know, shock absorbing setup, or whatever you want to call it. So I've got faith that these Bilstein struts are going to make a huge difference. And remember, if you don't have the spacer in the bottom, you will not have to mess with the ball joint. Take your 2 bottom bolts out, they come out the bottom. Take your 3 upper nuts off, your strut will pop right out. I do recommend a good heavy-duty spring compressor. The ones that I have, I've had for 30 years. They've always done me right, but they're not the best quality. And you know, you do run a risk of if that spring compressor lets loose at the wrong time, you're going to be in bad shape, especially if that spring is pointing towards you. Do not ever point the spring towards you. Anyway, I'm going to throw the tires on this and take it for a test drive, and I'll come back whenever I'm test driving it. I'll turn the camera on and I'll give you my opinion of what these struts are like. Till then, you guys take care.